Brancatelli,
Here.
Cleveland,
Here.
Griffin,
Here.
Harrison, Bashir Jones,
Here.
Light,
Present.
McCormick.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. This Development Planning Sustainability Committee hearing is being held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by HB 197. This meeting is being held using the Zoom platform and is being live streamed on YouTube and on Cleveland's Channel 20. And also can be seen on Cleveland City Council website and from Council's Facebook page. In accordance with Ohio Open Meetings Regulations as amended by HB 197, notice of this committee hearing was publicly posted. This committee hearing will be conducted as all committee hearings in accordance with the Roberts Rules of Order. The chair will facilitate the meeting and call on persons to speak. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand option on Zoom, and please limit your comments to the matters before today's committee. As is the usual practice, any actions to be voted on during the committee will be done by voice vote, called and recorded by the committee clerk. We have a handful of pieces of legislation today, and then we also have a presentation today. We'll do the legislation first. The first piece of legislation we have is Ordinance 677, 2020 by Council Members McCormick, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly by department request, giving consent of the City of Cleveland to the County of Cuyahoga for the replacement of the Jefferson Avenue Bridge between West 3rd Street and Cuyahoga River, authorizing the Director of Capital Projects to enter into agreements and apply for and accept an allocation of county motor vehicle license tax funds. Director Sprons, you're up.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The county will arrange for the preparation of construction plans and specifications, including engineering reports, and for the supervision and administration of the construction cost, and contribute 100% of all eligible costs for the project. The bridge improvement includes a cast in place concrete piles, a new concrete abutments, and a new concrete deck. The estimated cost for this project is $4.4 million, which is 100% county motor vehicle tax funded. The design is in process now, be complete in March 2021, and construction should be starting in April of 2021 and complete in 2021 in October 2021. This is in Councilman McCormick's ward.
Thank you very much. Councilman McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Fully support this legislation, and I've been briefed by the Capital Projects Office about this. Fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? See if I have any hands raised. Any questions for my colleagues? No further questions? Okay. Ordinance 677, 2020 stands approved as read. Next ordinance we have is 678, 2020 by Council Members McCormick, Johnson, and Brancatelli by department request. Authorize the Director of Capital Projects to issue a permit to Electric Gardens LLC to encroach into the public right-of-way of West 4th Street by installing, using, and maintaining streetscape and landscape improvements. Remarks by Director of Capital Projects, and this was previously reviewed and approved by Municipal Services. Director?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Electric Gardens LLC is constructing a mixed-use apartment building located on Literary Road and West 4th Street in Tremont called Electric Gardens. Electric Gardens has been in dialogue, conversations with the county, city, and metro parks on improving and maintaining a portion of West 4th Street abutting their property line and the pedestrian path or towpath trail, and is requesting an encroachment permit for these improvements. We do have consent from Councilman McCormick for these encroachments.
Thank you very much, Director. Councilman McCormick?
Heard and reviewed. Move for approval, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands. Any other comments from my colleagues? No further comments. 678, 2020 stands approved as read. 694, 2020 by Council Members McCormick, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly by department request to vacate a portion of West 37th Place and West 36th Street. Remarks by Capital Projects, previously heard and passed by Municipal Services. Director?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, West 37th Place and West 36th Streets abut the old Tinnerman Steel Range Company building. West 37th Place was originally proposed to be vacated in 1997, but was never fully vacated. Since then, the abutting property owners have been occupying the alley with fencing, landscaping, and other structural encroachments. To meet the tax credit requirements that the building windows be clear and accessible, the land group is seeking the vacation of West 37th Place, which will be split between all abutting property owners, extending the yards and securing the alley for both existing residents and proposed development, and compliance for all of the abutters with the municipal code. We do have consent from Councilman McCormick for this vacation.
Thank you, Director. Councilman McCormick?
I agree, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I do not see any hands raised. Any comments from my colleagues? No further comments. 694-2020 stands approved as read. Thank you very much. 695-2020, not Councilmember McCormick, Councilmember Councilmember Mooney, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly by department request to vacate a portion of the first named alley 10 feet wide west of Bel Air Road and north of Guardian Boulevard. This previous legislation was heard and passed in municipal services. Director?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this will vacate a portion of first unnamed alley west of Bel Air Road and north of Guardian Boulevard for the purpose of establishing an urban garden and installing what's called a high tunnel or hoop house. The goal, once these hoop houses are erected, is to grow organic fruits and vegetables, not only for the current residents, but for other health conscious individuals in the community and the city. We do have consent from Councilman Mooney for this vacation.
Thank you very much. Any questions from my colleagues on 695-2020? I do not see any hands for comment. No further questions or comment. 695-2020 stands approved as read. 696-2020 by Councilmember Santana, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly by department request to vacate a portion of Keene Court, Southwest, and West 31st Street. Remarks by Director of Capital Projects, previously heard and passed out of municipal services and properties.
Yes, good. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, St. Ignatius High School has recently completed a construction of an athletic center that borders West 31st Street and Chatham Avenue. Once vacated, Keene Court and West 31st Street would be closed to vehicles, remaining only as a pedestrian walkway, which would primarily be used by the students and the residents in that local area. We do have consent from Councilman McCormick for this vacation.
Councilman McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I fully support this request from the high school. They've been working really hard to improve this part of the community, both investing in the athletic field nearby as well as this new athletic complex. They worked with the community on these agenda items as well. The new athletic complex is beautiful. They did a really great job, not only on the inside, but making sure that it fit into the neighborhood. So fully support the request by the high school. If you look at the surrounding area, they control, I think, almost all of it, if not all of it. So this makes sense to allow for the campus to have better functionality in this section of the neighborhood.
Thank you. And for some reason, your name is not on this legislation.
Mr. Chair, I'd ask that the clerk add it,
Okay.
please.
No, thank you. Thank you. Clerk, if you can please add Councilman McCormick's on this legislation. Any further questions? I do not see any hands raised on this. No further questions. 696-2020 stands approved as read. Next piece of legislation we have is 731-2020 by Councilmembers Zone, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly. By department requests, an emergency ordinance authorized the Director of Capital Projects and/or City Planning to enter one or more contracts with Stephen Gutierrez for professional services necessary for the design, production, and installation of a yet-to-be-designed public artwork associated with and installed at the New Cleveland Kennel. Remarks by Director of Capital Projects. This was previously heard and approved by Municipal Services. Director?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the artist Stephen Gutierrez was selected by the Public Art Committee and approved by the City Planning Commission on his qualifications, and with the understanding that he would develop a public art concept for the newly built city kennel. The final design will be reviewed and approved by the City Planning Commission when that is complete. The estimated cost of this is $58,147. However, those funds have already been appropriated through the original construction of the facility. So those funds are already available through the original project. The design process should take about 4 months and the construction process should take about 6 months. This is been reviewed with Councilman Zone.
Thank you. And will this come back to council once this is designed?
No, it goes to city planning. This falls under the city public art ordinance.
Okay.
So that process, it goes to a public art committee and then it'll go to city planning and they have final approval.
Okay. And I see that Tara's on this. Did you want to add anything on this?
No, I was just here in case there were any additional questions about the project, but Director Sprine summed it up perfectly.
Okay. So your director responds as muscle today. Okay.
I don't know about that.
Any questions from my colleagues on 7/31/2020? We're pretty excited that these art projects and installations are part of our capital projects and really add significant value to them. No further questions. 7/31/2020 stands approved as read. Thank you very much, Director. The next piece we have up is 7/33/2020 by Council Members Johnson and Kelly by department request. Authorize the Director of Public Works to employ one or more professional consultants to assess and make recommendations to improve the West Side Market operations for a period not to exceed 3 years. Is this, I don't see Director Cox.
No, Director Cox isn't here, but A.D. Johnson is here. Good
All
morning,
right.
Chairman Brackatelli and committee members. As the
morning.
chairman indicated, we are requesting legislative authority to enter into a contract with a professional consultant to assess and make recommendations to improve overall operations of West Side Market to include such things as to develop recommendations on what products and services would strengthen the market's appeal, develop recommendations on how to improve diverse vendor recruitment efforts, analyze the role of the market as a business incubator, and identify the specific services required to support the success of the vendors. Establish a tool to receive customer feedback and evaluate customer satisfaction, to create a process to evaluate vendor performance, develop recommendations on how we can encourage repeat customer visits and creative revenue streams. And the consultant will also review and access our current day-to-day maintenance practices and provide recommendations on how we can increase efficiency and improve project coordination and enhance for the vendors. We're asking this committee's approval of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. I see I have Councilman Bashir Jones. You have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I don't mean to overstep Councilman McCormick. Councilman McCormick, do you mind if I?
We're saving him for cleanup.
Okay.
He's going to back clean up.
But still, this is his area, so I just want to make sure he's okay with me just asking a question about the West Side Market.
Councilman?
Go ahead, Councilman.
Okay. How are you engaging the vendors that are already there to make sure that they are part of this process?
The professional consultant that we will hire will be engaging them by way of dialogue and just the interaction that they'll have as they meet. The attendance has a board, so we'll be working closely with that board and also the various vendors within the market.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have Councilman Joe Jones has your hand up.
Please unmute yourself.
What is the capacity? Thank you. What is the capacity of the marketplace right now?
The occupancy?
That's correct. I mean, is it 25% vacant, 10% vacant? What are we looking at?
Councilman Jones, I do not have the occupancy numbers with me right now, but I would certainly be able to provide those to you.
Assistant Director, is Felicia on this call?
No, she is not.
Okay.
So we're doing this study, and the purpose of the study is to improve the market space. Is that right, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
To the chairman, to the councilman, yes.
And we don't know what the capacity of the facility is right now at the time offhand.
Council chairman, to the councilman, I do not know the number at this time. We do have that information. I just cannot provide it to you at this moment in time.
Mr. Chairman, to the director, do we know how many vendors are at the market space right now?
Council chair, to the councilman, I actually thought that was the question that you were asking when you talked about capacity, the number of vendors and stands that we have open at the time.
Okay, so the initial question was, Mr. Chairman, to the director, what was the vacancy rate? So how are we 99% full, 80% full, 70% full at the marketplace?
Councilman, as I stated, I do not have that information with me at this time, but I
Okay.
will certainly provide you that information. I just don't have it with me at this moment. We do know what that is. I do not know it at this particular moment in time.
And so I guess the question would also be, Mr. Chairman, to the director, we don't know how many vendors are at the market as well at this time?
That is correct, Councilman.
So then what's the purpose of having to approve this if we don't have this information and we don't have an opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to talk about where we are in terms of that market space? Mr. Chairman, that's to the chairman, director.
Do you have a response on why are we doing this study if we don't know the status of the occupancy?
Council Chairman, he said that he wasn't asking. He said it was to.
Councilman Jones, who are you directing that question to?
Well, the question is, why are we even here to having a conversation if we don't have any basic information on the place that we're talking about? This is basic. This basic
Director, is there, what is the rationale for doing this study?
Council Chairman and council members, the basis for the legislation is so that we can have a consultant come in to help us to assess and make recommendations to improve the overall operations of the Westside Market. And I just listed a number of areas in which we would be looking at improving. And one of those areas is vendor recruitment. So the purpose of the legislation goes beyond, it would certainly help us to improve the status of the tenants that are there, but it is not the single focus. It is an important part of it. And
So,
I'm happy to repeat those.
We had a study done in, it was another, I think it was a 3-year study, 2010, 2012. Do we have the results of that study available to council?
I will check on that for you, Councilman Chairman Brackatelli.
Okay, so if we can get it, yeah, so if we can compare what that study said back then, we can get that to Joe Titron and he can distribute it. And was there recommendations done by, I thought some recommendations already come through through Felicia on for the facility. Is there written recommendations already from the director?
Council
or the manager?
Chairman, What we're looking to do is to engage a professional who has some expertise in terms of markets, and then address a lot of the major concerns and issues with regards to the CES, just to help us to be more successful at the Westside Market. It'll deal with a lot of the issues that some of the customers and the tenants have, been sharing with us over time. And so we're really excited about bringing on a professional to kind of help us in this area.
So do you have a professional in mind already for this study?
We do not have the consultant. Will allow us to be able to enter into an agreement with a consultant. We have not entered into any agreement.
So is an RFP going out for a consultant?
Yes, that is correct. An RFP has gone out, and we're in the process of reviewing and making our final recommendation.
So if I can request that if you provide Joe a copy of the RFP when it's complete.
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman
thank you.
Jones, you're still on the clock?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the director, do we know, do we have the information on how much income comes in from the West Side Market? Rephrase it. Mr. Chairman, to the director, do we know what our annual income is from the West Side Market?
The annual rents paid by the tenants? Is that what you're looking for, Councilman?
Yes.
Rents paid by the tenants?
Right, combined. What's the total
of
combined?
the annual rents paid by the tenants?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, to the director.
Okay, I'll provide that for you, sir.
Okay, so we don't. Do we have an idea what it might be, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
Councilman, I would hate to give you an inaccurate number, so I'll make sure that I get that information for you.
So we'll get that Joe. She'll get that to Joe Titron, Councilman Jones, and then we can distribute that.
I see. And so then this study, Mr. Chairman, how much is the cost of the study to the director?
Councilman, we are estimating that about over $100,000, about $137,000.
And Mr. Chairman, to the director, do we, I mean, what would be probably exciting is as an ideal, Mr. Chairman, to the director, we could have ideas and opinions from the public, open it up to ask the public what would they like to see out of their West Side Market. Have we thought about doing anything like that as relates to engaging the community as a whole?
Also, Chairman Brackatelli, to Councilman Jones, yes, that is one of the things that we're looking for the consultant to do, is to establish a tool for us to receive customer feedback and then evaluate our overall customer satisfaction.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you to the director. I have no further questions.
Thank you. This is in Councilman McCormick's ward. Councilman McCormick, you're up, and have you been briefed on this, please?
Mr. Chair, no, I have not. Chair, I wanted to say a couple things, if I may, and I appreciate the interest of my colleagues, and that really shows that, that this is a regional, not just the city of Cleveland, a regionally significant institution for the city of Cleveland. And Mr. Chair, I would ask that we hold this piece. No, I've not been briefed on it, but more importantly than that, I would recommend, Chair, that we have a larger hearing on the updated status of the West Side Market. What is, to the questions of my colleagues around occupancy, to the questions of what's currently happening to retain and grow our vendor base. The proposal in front of us is a 3-year proposal. Tony, by then you could be in Florida retired by then. So we got to make sure that, no, but the point is that I look, this deserves a much larger conversation. As you're aware, the community that I represent and beyond, again, referenced by my colleagues' interest as well, is very, very interested in an update on what's going on at the West Side Market, what the plan is, if, is a consultant being brought on? If so, what is the scope of that? Not only just in a piece of paper, provided to the committee, but I think this really deserves I would say an independent hearing, if not a larger piece of time to get a full update on what's going on at the West Side Market. I know, Mr. Chairman, that it is top of mind for the community that I represent. It's top of mind for residents of the city of Cleveland and for the region. So I would ask that we hold this piece and that we re-engage with this piece at a later time when we have the ability to have a much larger conversation with folks from the mayor's administration. I've said a million times, Assistant Director Johnson is awesome. This is by no means concern, with her leadership. She's one of the most diligent public servants at City Hall. This is just more in a reference to ensuring that we have a much larger conversation about the market and how this piece fits into it.
Understood. And I know we have legislation that's been heard already that has allocated nearly $15 million of capital projects, capital improvements for the West Side Market, for arcade door replacements, vendor booth, electrical, meat prep, clock tower, vendor booths, food service. I think these all play into if we're making significant capital improvements, how does that relate to what this study will be telling us in terms of what are the needs and what should we be doing? I'm trying to find in our budget book that one of the questions on what our losses were last year, and it looks like we lost last year a little over $250,000 in the market, took in 1.6 and revenues were 1.3. So I think those are relevant terms in terms of our questions for as we look at this study and we're losing money on it. It is an absolute gem and jewel of our city and our region. It's one of our major tourist attractions. So I understand your point, Councilman McCormick, on wanting to hold this until you're fully briefed and we have a larger discussion on this. So with that, if there are no further questions, I will look at that request to hold 7/33/2020 until Councilmember McCormick is briefed and further information is brought forth as we requested at this hearing. So, Madam Clerk, please hold 7/33/2020.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And that completes the legislative portion of our agenda. Now we have a presentation. Development Planning Sustainability Committee will be receiving an update from the Department of Community Development on various city programs. Programs to be discussed will be the Healthy Homes Initiative, the PAINT program, and various COVID relief efforts. And we have a number of guests online. Assistant Director Wakers, are you doing the presentation? I do not. Oh, there's Director Maness. There she is. She's lurking in the shadows here. Director, you can't hide from us.
Yeah, she may have been pulled away from another item briefly.
I know she's in another meeting, so.
But I'm happy to
Teal, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members of the council. So we are here to present on a number of items. We have members of our team here, including our Fair Housing Officer, Maria Sosa, our Community Engagement Manager, I probably messed up the title, but Nina Holzer, and they'll be briefing you both on their programs. I will doing a briefing as well on the CARES Act accomplishments that we're seeing in the first 3 months of our programs. And I believe that's all from our team aside from the director. So at this time, I think first on the list was the CARES Act accomplishments. I know a presentation was sent, so we need to sort of get that co-host set up for the CARES Act accomplishment PowerPoint. So I don't think I've seen that yet.
You have co-host ability.
I have co-host, great. I will put that up right now. If you give me one moment.
Hold on, I can put my mask.
Apologize for the delay.
What's in there?
Can't.
So all right, so I'm looking for the sharing. So I know I'd emailed it in. Do I share it?
It's that, you should be able to get that at the bottom of your screen to share screen.
Yeah, I have that. Okay. Okay.
There we go.
There you go. Okay. So
If you
So
can
to
click
start
on full
with-
screen, if you can click on full screen,
all right.
I'm old and my eyesight gets, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. It's the first time doing it through Zoom. So very good. So I'll be presenting on the CARES Act accomplishments. Obviously, this city received notice back in the spring that we were getting federal funding under the CARES Act, a total of almost $11.3 million across multiple funding sources. So community development block grants, emergency solution grants that deal with homelessness, and a small grant for HOPWA, which deals with housing for people with HIV/AIDS. The map that you see on the screen right now is a representation of all the good work that has occurred throughout the city of Cleveland under these three programs. Those different colored pins represent different type of program accomplishments, including, we'll go through a little bit more, but providing food to families throughout the city of Cleveland, or rental assistance, or services to seniors in this, particularly at-risk populations. But this gives you a representation that in the first 3 months, we are having an impact, and it's spread out through the city of Cleveland as a whole. And I also want to really stress that these were completely new programs that did not exist 6 months ago. So it's really a testament to our partners and how they've been able to sort of respond to the call and use the resources that we provided them to do some good. So next screen. Just give you a set overview. So in the first 3 months, we've had an impact on at least 8,000 households that represent over 12,000 people in the city of Cleveland. A large share of those are elderly, over 2,300 households, and also households with children, 2,400 children. And the remaining is another 8,000 adults between the ages of 18 to 61. In terms of who we're reaching out to in terms of race or ethnicity, by and large, we're reaching mostly African-American households, but we do have around 2,000 households that report themselves to be white or Caucasian. And then we have around 500 households that are a mix of other types of races, and the bar graph sure breaks down that mix. HUD treats Hispanic or Latino as a language group as opposed to a race. So you can have white, Hispanic, and Black and Hispanic. And around 616 households represent themselves as being Hispanic. So I think the good news is that those that we're reaching out to reflect the makeup of our community. So we are positive. We feel fairly good that we're actually reaching those that are intended to be reached. Also, in terms of income, the vast majority of the people who are seeing some benefit from our programs are very low income, 30% of AMI or below. The next sort of largest contingent is low income, which is 50% area medium income. And then we have a small makeup of moderate income or higher income participants in our programs. People, how they've been impacted by the coronavirus. CARES Act requires that you have some sort of impact related to the coronavirus. And it could be, we've broken it down by, has your income been impacted or has your housing situation been impacted? There are some other, public health related aspects. But by and large, households are seeing one being affected in either income or housing or both. So this gives you an idea of how people have been impacted by that. So 1,500 households have had their income reduced, and 700 households have lost all their income as a result of coronavirus impact. That represents around 20% of all our CARES Act participants, and it wouldn't surprise me if 20% is sort of the general trend throughout the city of Cleveland as a whole. So we know that a large segment of our community is really suffered under coronavirus. Then the same goes for housing. We are seeing around 800 households who are delinquent on rent, and another 150 households who are facing eviction. This represents sort of around 10% of Cleveland's population who have some sort of struggles around housing. And I wouldn't be surprised that this is sort of the trend for a larger, for city of Cleveland, that 10% are struggling with housing under this coronavirus impact. Moving on, we are funding 37 programs, and here's a table that gives you a sense of the type of accomplishments we're seeing across various programs. I will say the top line there, rental assistance, Maria Sosa will go much farther into, and she has more up-to-date data. My data tends to lag by 2 to 3 weeks based on how our reporting is. But as of the end of September, we had sort of 423 households who have gone completely through the rental assistance program and are seeing money go towards their rent. But that has really accelerated substantially as we've progressed. So she's going to have some very positive numbers to report. As you can see, even from in the last month, we had an increase of 248 households from what was previously, I think, in around less than 200 households had benefited from rental assistance. So we saw a doubling in that month alone, and we're sort of seeing that trend accelerate. We're also providing assistance and utility assistance, referral services, trying to connect people with the myriad of resources available throughout the city, senior services, homeless prevention and outreach, food bank and food delivery services have seen a significant amount of demand. We are in the beginnings of working with Digital C on broadband access, and they're making some good strides. And then special needs homeless, which is really supporting our continuum of care. If you're not familiar with the continuum of care, that's essentially the coalition that works to address homelessness throughout the city of Cleveland. And there's been real success there in terms of keeping people infection rates low in our homelessness population, but that is as a result of a significant effort to deconcentrate shelters, putting people who are homeless or coming out of the hospital system into hotel rooms as opposed to directly into the shelter population. But also there's been significant costs associated with hazard pay and other type of PPE and physical changes that needed to happen, and all that has had to be paid for in some way, and the city of Cleveland has been using its resources to help do that in collaboration with the county, which I think has been a really great partnership. Where we stand today and where we're trying to go. So this is a bar graph of sort of the goals that our programs have established and where we are. So after 3 months, we are starting to make a dent in those goals, and I think by May of next year, many of those will be very close, if to not exceeding their goals. I think food delivery sort of and food bank are the ones that are already sort of, because there's such a huge need, they're getting close to, in some ways, meeting the goals. And I apologize, I didn't explain what the colors mean, but blue is the goals, orange is the number of households, and gray is the number of people within those households. So as you can see, the orange is sort of where we are today, and the blue is where we want to be. So after 3 months, we're making progress, and I think all our programs are now up and running fully, and this really will start to accelerate through the winter and spring months. So this is a graph sort of taking the same title page image, showing all the pins throughout the city of Cleveland, and this gives you an idea of what has been reported and their status in terms of how we can report them back to HUD. That's always a big issue in terms of the city of Cleveland, making sure that the data we're collecting is translatable to reportable accomplishments to HUD. So we've had 8,000 accomplishments reported. 76 are pending review, which basically means staff is awaiting, still needs to get around to reviewing those. But 6,000 have been checked and verified that they have all the data points we need in order to report them to HUD. 1,600 are incomplete. So our partners need to go back and probably find that piece of information that's missing and give it to us so that we can report it on. 35 have been determined ineligible. Ineligible has basically been when a household has claimed that they have had no impact from coronavirus. That's the main reason why things have become ineligible under these programs. And there's been some possible double counts. So food distribution might report the family 1 month and then report them again the second month. That's considered a double count under the HUD rules. And we want to avoid that as much as possible. You know, we might serve a family 12 times throughout the year, but that's still one family we're serving. We don't want to report that family 12 times and then suddenly looks like our numbers look great when in fact it doesn't reflect reality. Funding, where we are. So we have 16 million in CARES Act funding across CDBG, ESG, and HOPWA. Currently, we've from our partners, there's been a little over $1 million requested for reimbursement, and as the months go on, that amount will obviously increase. We have funding earmarked to programs, and they'll work to spend through it. HUD, going back to the last recession, when they had special funding, wanted to see 70% spent by the time the first year was up. I would assume that something similar will be posted by HUD towards the end of the first year. So we are working on that sort of schedule and trying to get 70% of the funding spent in the first year. What we are also doing is, as clients are reported into our reporting system, we want our partners to sort of survey what their other needs are. We think it's great that they're getting service from a particular program, but we also want to know what other services they need, and hopefully we can refer those clients directly to those programs we're funding or to other partners in the community that might exist. So of all the 8,000 clients, around 2,700 have reported other needs, and this is sort of a breakdown of those other needs. And it sort of gives us an idea of what is happening and is unmet. There's a lot to go through, but I do want to highlight that, rental assistance, we're still seeing, 495 had reported that they needed rental assistance, and we're not sort of plugged into our rental assistance program yet. So we've referred those clients to our rental assistance partner. Interestingly, we found a large number that also reported that they were delinquent on rent or facing eviction that were not actually plugged into our rental assistance program. So we also made sure those were plugged into our other programming. We're really trying to make a network of partners sharing information so that they don't all exist in silos, but are working to reinforce what they're doing with each other, and that households don't have to navigate themselves through these various different programs, but that we can try and be a resource for them. And finally, my last slide. I just want to leave you with that image that what we are doing throughout the city of Cleveland. As the months go on, there'll be more pins throughout the city, but I am happy that in the first 3 months, we've been able to touch all corners of Cleveland, and hopefully we'll be able to address real needs that people are seeing on the ground. So I will hand this over to, I think the director is back and maybe she wants to chime in. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And again, my apologies. I was following the hearings and then got pulled away with an employee issue. But as you can see, you were in good hands, and I don't want to take any more time other than to really pass it over to Maria, who's been great. She jumped in with little to actually no notice to manage the rental assistance program with McKeel. It's really in good hands, especially with her orientation around fair housing and and the fact that she's multilingual, and just it's been a pleasure to see her grow into this role, and she has great information to share with you.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and everyone here. Yes, I'm Maria Sosa. I'm the Office of Fair Housing Manager, and I'm managing the implementation of the rental assistance. And I'm gonna share with you guys a little overview about the rental assistance program that we have put together. It is a new program as of the spring that we started developing, and it became active in the summer, and also where we are today. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with a presentation. Okay, so the rental assistance program, we put an RFP late in the spring, and CHN Housing Partners and Eden partnered to administer the rental assistance program. One great thing I think for all residents is that it has been done in collaboration with the county. Funds from the CDBG grant and also the Coronavirus Relief Fund from the CARES Act has been used. From the city of Cleveland, we used $11.3 million from the CARES Act allocated for the rental assistance, since we anticipated that will be one of the greatest needs due to the pandemic. The rest of the presentation will be up to date with the numbers as of yesterday, October 19. So first, just an overview of who qualifies. The residents of the city of Cleveland who are having troubles making rent payments qualified if it's due to COVID-19 pandemic. And the program pays up to April 1st, any back due amount up to this date. In order to qualify, residents must state their income for the emergency rental assistance program. And it's done by a self-certification where they state their income and also the reason why they have been affected by COVID-19. That's for the initial 4 months of emergency assistance. Now, we also have the Eden part of the presentation of the program, which in order to qualify, the tenant must indicate that they can pay the rent moving forward after they receive the initial 4 months of assistance, that they live in the city of Cleveland, that the household is at 50% AMI. So it's lower for the first 4 months, it's 120 MI. Then the tenant is referred to Eden directly by CHN Housing Partners. And they will be required to submit additional documentation to make sure they're eligible. So CHN serves as the entry point to screen all applicants. So they wouldn't be able to go directly to Eden, though we develop everything. So it will be one channel, go through one place, and that way they could determine what is the best source of assistance. The application and everything was done from scratch. Our website was created, which is neorenthelp.org. One great thing for our community, it is completing in English and Spanish. And also there's a toll-free number that people could complete the application or obtain assistance. Ideally, the best way to do it on the website, neorenthelp.org. In addition to the rental assistance, all applicants are screened to see if they need additional assistance, such as utility assistance or others. So that's one great thing about having CHN partner, because they have availability and other resources that it could help the tenants. Priority is given to people that are already in the eviction process. Now, if the applicant goes through the process and qualifies, up to 4 months will be paid to the landlord directly. So the checks are cut directly to the landlord. So there's the second phase, which I'll go through, where the landlord's information is obtained and the checks are sent directly to them. Now, once the assistance is provided for up to 4 months, if they need an additional help, then they're referred to Eden. In terms of Eden, it is specifically for residents of the city of Cleveland. And within that additional assistance, they could qualify for up to 9 months. So potentially someone could be about 12 months of assistance. Once they are transferred to Eden, the household will be qualified based on the income, and they will be required to provide additional documentation. So they will be out of the self-certification of income and need, and they will be required to provide additional documents as required for HUD, because it's a different source of funds. Some of the things that Eden will do is conduct an inspection that is required for the funding, and re-inspection if necessary. They will calculate the subsidy. They would issue the rent payments, which are also paid directly to the landlord. Additionally, they will they will see if they still need ongoing assistance every 3 months. So it's not automatic. There will be a checkup points every month, and every 3 months, they will be reevaluated to see if they still need assistance. Another thing, Eden will communicate with CHN or any of the referral partners that have forward or referred the client. And moving forward, how residents can apply or how to refer residents. So not only for your information on anyone watching, they could apply by going to neorenthehelp.gov.org, and it's in English and Spanish, or they could call the number. The website is very easy to access and very friendly with a cell phone. They could upload documents, take pictures, so we made it as easy as possible for our residents. Then they will complete the application. And if they need additional help, or they could come directly through one of the referral agencies. We develop a network of referral agencies for the rental assistance program for those clients that need that additional help, so they could go and obtain it. So the referral agencies for the rental assistance program is United Way 211, Frontline Services, the Spanish American Committee, and Legal Aid. Great entry points with 211, a lot of people call them. So we have that resource for Spanish speaking residents. We have the Spanish American Committee, which could also help anyone in the community as well. Frontline could help with mediation, and Legal Aid, also a great partner because they have other resources such as the right to counsel they could help with. In order to provide full documentation, which is the first step to be able to move forward, the documents that they need are pretty basic for the first 4 months of assistance, which is documentation to prove their identity, a photo ID for anyone 18 years old or older. They need either Social Security or birth certificates on top of additional documentation for their identity, and the lease. And the lease could be provided a little later on down the road. We could obtain that from the landlord. Now, if the tenant requires additional assistance, after the 4 months, they refer to Eden, and then they will need full documentation. Applications are time-stamped, so they work through them as they receive the documents and everything is completed, then it will be able to move forward. The need in the program, we selected the partners in the beginning of June. And in June, the program was actually announced and 211 began taking applications. And also within the Department of Community Development, we had a dedicated email and phone line that we gathered some people that needed the need. By July 1st, when the program actually started, that they were ready, the website went live, we had already 1,400 applicants. So there was already that amount of need. By July 15, when the program became operational, there were an additional 1,900 applicants. So immediately there was a big overwhelm of applicants that needed help. Where we are today, and these are the numbers as of yesterday, Monday, October 19, total applications submitted, that's for people that have completed online and actually hit the submit button, 3,584. Total applications in eviction proceedings, 997, and these are all specifically for the city of Cleveland. And total applications in process, 3,100. That means they're actually moving through the process. They have the documentation. There could be people that have submitted, but they didn't upload any documents. That's why the difference between submitted and in process. Now, these are some more specific numbers. We are about a little over $7 million that we are seeing that there's the need of the people that have already submitted the application. The average rent for those 4 months is around, or everything owed, is around $2,000. Now, these numbers are for the tenants that have gone through the process. They submitted all of their documentation, and now we are just waiting for verification, approval from information from the landlord. So once the tenant completes their part, or many times, I mean, it will be at the same time, but we are pending the documents from the landlord, verification on how much they owed and how to send them the check, basically. And with those numbers and checks ready to be sent, they are sent every other Friday. The last time they were sent was October 9th. So this Friday, these numbers would actually increase. There's another batch of checks that are getting ready to be sent to the landlords. But as of yesterday, submitted, it's a little over $2 million, $2.1 million. Rental assistance that are right now approved, have completed, they're almost ready to go and for the checks to be sent, 275,000, and actual payments mailed, done up to 4 months to the landlords, 737,000. And wanted to share so we could see where our residents are. The biggest reasons for the crisis that we're seeing is definitely layoffs and furlough, also reduced hours. Now, there are other economic impacts due to the pandemic, and we have those as different categories, but definitely it's still layoffs and reduced hours. Now, the level of income of the participants, we definitely see that it's affecting in the city of Cleveland, extremely low and very low individuals. The demographics that we're seeing, the big blue, it's about 70%, which is Black. White follow with around 14%, and some that chose not to respond or there are multiple races. For ethnicity, they're actually asked as a separate question whether they're Hispanic or not. And those that have chosen to respond, we have about a 7%, almost 8% that are Hispanic that have applied for the rental assistance program. In terms of zip codes, we see that is throughout the city. We have been able to help everyone. So we have a breakdown of where we see the majority of the applications, which zip codes within the city of Cleveland. And actually the dollar amount in that overall that have been paid up to the 4 months of payments. Now, we have developed the program and worked really hard, and I appreciate the leadership in my department under the Director Menez and Assistant Director Walker, and the partnership, which has been amazing with CHN Housing Partners, because we have developed this program as we go and just learn things. And one of the things that we saw in around September, we noticed that most of the people, a large amount of the people that were applying for the 3 months initial assistance actually needed more help. So the program was developed initially with 3 months emergency assistance. Since then, we have increased it to a 4 months emergency assistance due to that, which meant that other files were not progressing because they needed more assistance and they were not able necessarily to move to Eden, because then that would still slow down the process because additional documentation was needed. So it was great that it was increased to 4 months. And we have seen great numbers because of that, of being able to help people. And at that time, before we increased it, and even now, if they need more than 4 months of emergency assistance, CHN Housing Partners has access to other forms of funding from the state and other sources. So they're able to utilize that as well. And they definitely screen those individuals before they have to move into full documentation with Eden. But that slows down the process to about 2 weeks of processing. So that's some of the things that we have learned. We are also learning that a lot of the applicants do indicate that they are not sure how they're going to pay rent moving forward. So even though we might be helping them with immediate need, it doesn't seem to be completely satisfied. So we're just paying attention to as things develop. Another thing that we are learning and experiencing, landlords, they're having some resistance. They're not obligated to accept this income, this payment. So we are seeing some resistance from the landlords. We do have legal aids frontline, and CHN is great about trying to work with them. And also we have briefed, I know at the beginning I briefed the housing court, and they're fully aware of the program and everyone there. So there's definitely an awareness from those partners, but they're not obligated to accept the money. But in general, they are working with the tenants. Another thing that we learned is that once the applicants transition to Eden, it is definitely a little more difficult, the barrier of having to provide more documentation. Now they need full pay stubs and bank statements. There are a lot of things that is a barrier for them to be able to move forward faster throughout the process of after the 4 months of initial assistance. Another thing, once, especially they need the actual documentation for the COVID-related hardship. For some people, it is difficult. It is easy when all they need is if they were furloughed or they lost their job. But as you know, a lot of people are experiencing having children, extra expenses in food or maybe utilities. Those are things that are harder to prove. So people are having a hard time coming up with the right documentation for that. So that also slows down the process for once you require full documentation for the assistance. Another thing that we are learning is that there is a requirement for the inspection once they're in the Eden side, and not all houses or households are passing the initial inspection. There is a process for re-inspection. They let them know what's necessary, but that's definitely another difficulty that we are seeing within the process. Now, how can you help? Everyone in the committee and everyone listening, just to let people know, I personally believe there's a lot more people that need help out there, and maybe they're not aware of this program. Like many things, wonderful things we offer in the city, and I experience seeing that not everyone is aware. So letting people know. Also, a large amount of people that need it are from the lower income, but there's also a lot of people that are experiencing this hardship for the first time, not being able to pay rent. And those people have no idea, or maybe they don't want to say it. So just even sharing and just the information with everyone overall, that will really help. So the main source will be the website, neorenthealth.org, and also the phone number in case they need assistance or any questions. Also, there are some members of our population that, even though we made it as easy as possible, you could snap a picture and upload all the documents, it's still challenging for them to maybe send those documents. So we have, in addition to the actual referral sources, we have CDCs and a lot of people in the community that know about the program, that they're willing to help them scan documents or help out. But if anyone is approached that way, you could send them to the referral sources or the CDCs if they need additional assistance to actually navigate the process. If they're referred by the agency, they're also able to help them check on status, which is a lot easier than when the person individually does it. Letting people know how eviction works. That's another thing that would be helpful. A lot of people are very afraid if they miss 1 month, they automatically will be out. And we have within the housing court a whole system. There's also the moratorium that was implemented by the CDC that has a specific requirement. The one with from the city and the state already expired, but the CDC one is a federal one specifically for COVID-related hardship. For more information, the legal aid actually has the form. There's a affidavit that must be completed because it's not a blanket moratorium on eviction. It's one that the individual actually has to complete a form and certify that they are eligible and actually give it to the landlord. So just putting that information out there so they know. Now, this is only a moratorium from the CDC to prevent homelessness. So that expires December 31st. So rent is due. And one of the requirements to be eligible for that moratorium from the CDC is that they have applied for a government assistance program, and this will satisfy that. So in order to have that right, they must, it's good that they complete this step. And this is it from the state, from the city. So I think that's an important thing to know and share with our residents. We do have flyers. I know many of you guys, members of council, and many people have shared already in social media, which is great. So, we have those available in English and Spanish, and just sharing the website will be wonderful. So with that, if anyone has any questions, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Let me just check, Director Medes, do you want to have the healthy homes, or do you want to?
Well, no, I think it makes sense to answer questions on CARES Act. The Healthy Homes specialists have certainly helped to spread the message on these programs, but they're pretty separate.
Okay, great. So with that, I'll open up questions with colleagues. Councilman Bashir Jones.
Thank you, Chair. First, let me say to our wonderful Director Medes that you are going to be absolutely missed. You did a fantastic job with us, and
she's leaving.
Yeah, surprise. She's just a phenomenal person. Really, since I've been in office, streamlined this process with community development, made things a lot more quicker, and very communicative. And I just appreciate her. I wish her the best in her. I think she's leaving the country, I think. No, I'm joking. But, wherever she goes, they're going to be very blessed to have her. The city is very blessed to have her. And I just wanted to openly say thank you so much for your service to the city of Cleveland. And of course, you're going to serve us in a different way, in a different capacity. But I just wanted to say that openly. Thank you for all your work. Chair, these type of programs, they always start off with great intentions. And my concern is a couple of things. And if we can just maybe write this down, if the group can write it down. Number one, in my area, I have the largest area of Asian Americans. So, Chinese has to be a language that is utilized in this process. Then, of course, you have different dialects with Mandarin and so forth and so on. Arabic is another language that needs to be used. So just please make sure that those other languages are available as well for residents who need that service. Secondly, one of the things that I've found is that, and not even just talking about the city, just in general, processes is what kills everything. So we may have the best intentions, but those who are in most of the need seems to be pushed out of the process. The process is what kills them. How much paperwork? What paperwork? How many times? So I'm really interested, and it doesn't have to be answered right now, but I'm just hoping that the structure is on point, that when we send residents to receive this service, that if someone calls, they're already feeling a sense of stress and trauma in having to call. So the last thing we want is to add stress, to add trauma to the process, where you have the wrong people picking up the phones. You have the wrong people dealing with the paperwork. You have the wrong people dealing with this, dealing with that. And then now the city becomes more of a hindrance than a help. So, Chair, that's extremely, extremely important. And I'm sure that they're clear about that, but I just want to make that clear because when I send residents, particularly to get services from the city, one of their biggest complaints, and I understand there's always two sides, even to a thin slice of bologna. So I know that there's always two sides to a story. And I know that sometimes my residents can not be as patient as they need to be, but it's hard to be patient when you're drowning. So as a city, we have to make sure that our processes are tight and on point. So there's a couple of things that I had some just not even concerns, just want to highlight. Number one, make sure there's more languages than just English and Spanish. There has to be, and also we really fell on this one. We need to have information for the hearing impaired, and even here on our Zoom calls, and I don't know if this is happening on TV 20, but someone should be in a little box somewhere signing everything that we're talking about. I have a large population of hearing and seeing impaired in my neighborhood, and they don't have any idea about the information that we're giving, and we're depending on their family to get it to them, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So as a city, we just have to make sure that we cover all of our bases to communicate to everyone these great services that we have. I think that's very, very important. And I think that's it. And also, not necessarily to this, but hopefully this question can be answered. A lot of city workers have been coming to me, Chair, talking about essential pay. That there's some pay that they're supposed to be receiving as essential workers. I don't have any information on that. I've had numerous city workers from my neighborhood approach me about it and say, hey, we've been told by our supervisors that we're supposed to be receiving essential pay from the PPP or PPE or GDG. I don't know. But the fact is that I've heard it on more than one occasion. Are you familiar with that at all, Chair?
I am not familiar about city employees getting essential pay, and maybe the director can respond.
No, I can respond just very briefly to a couple of your other comments, and I did write it down that I think it's something we need to take to Chief Dumas to ask her from a city employee perspective and just make her aware that you're asking these questions. So just a couple things. First, thank you for the well wishes. It's really been my privilege to work with all of you. And I think really my new position at CMP, I'll be working with council a great deal. And I think the benefit of understanding how City Hall works will be very helpful in that position to all of you, to the CDCs and community we support. But thank you for those kind words. From a CDBG perspective with the CARES Act funds, one of the things that was really helpful here is that HUD did allow us to raise the public service cap so that we could provide these dollars almost exclusively to our partners, where they are out in the community, where they do have a relationship with residents, to try to reduce that barrier of entry and to reduce the process. There still is process, but it's much less. It's really documenting who the resident is, their need, some of the things that Maria shared, and understanding why they needed the support. It's still not perfect, Councilman, but it definitely has reduced that barrier. And yet you heard both Maria and Nikhil talk about the need to reach more residents more broadly. So I think that's helpful. And then Maria, can you speak? I think CHN has done a good job of making the application in some aspects available in some other languages, and otherwise we'll take that back.
Yeah, that was so I share the concern from the councilman. That was one of the things that I wanted to implement and make sure that the outreach was to all of our residents. In terms of Spanish, since that's like the largest population that we have, they were able to completely do the website, which prior to that, they didn't have it. That's one of the things when I looked at some of the things in the organizations in the community. And I thought, okay, if we're gonna do this, at least bilingual. So that was the first step, but I did spoke with them and the organizations about having more languages available. I shared the language line that the City of Cleveland uses. I know they have hired new staff and they have gone out of the way to hire bilingual, not only in Spanish, but other languages. So there's definitely that awareness and something that they're working towards. So I completely agree. I mean, the more accessible it is in terms of language, the better. So
Yeah.
we have the
So
Spanish.
Chair to the director, I'm sorry to cut you off. Chair to the director, can you have someone get back to me on that to make sure that that's complete? Because even Spanish, there's different dialects in Spanish. You know, there's different dialects of Chinese, different, and we want to make sure that the hearing impaired, how are they touching the hearing impaired and the seeing impaired? Can you get back to me on that, along with man, I lost my thought. Lost my train of thought. Yeah. So just on the language. Oh, another thing. I'm sorry. I found it. Chair to the director, you have also a lot of our Clevelanders who may, who have green cards or who may not be citizens as of yet, but still need these type of services. How are we taking care of those who are, who have their green cards and not U.S. citizens as of yet? Are they excluded from this?
Citizenship is not a
Chair. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was going to ask Assistant Director Wackers to respond to that because I don't want to share incorrect information.
No, they're not excluded outright. They do need to verify residence in the United States. But typically that just means they complete the forms and they attest that they are legal residents, and that anything that they provide on a form, there's a statement that it could be subject to verification at some later date at which they promise to provide that documentation. But being a legal resident in the United States is not there's no prohibition in terms of getting services under these funds.
Great, thank you so much. So Chair, I close with, if I can just get that information, if we can just make sure that that's taken care of, that we're reaching everyone. I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Slife.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just tag ending to the language issue that Councilman Jones brought up. Maybe a recommendation might be if we're not already, to engage with Global Cleveland. They work with obviously immigrant populations writ large, but that includes a lot of refugees and other groups, and they have a lot of services available to help plug people in for there's a lot of Bhutanese, Nepali refugees on the west side, and that's maybe a more niche language skill, but they're queued up for it. So if that's something we could not only use as a resource, but maybe also as a way to advertise the availability of these programs, I think that'd be worthwhile. Mr. Chair, a question to Ms. Sosa on the rental assistance program. To what degree is Housing Court keyed into these programs and even acting as some sort of referral agency when eviction cases are coming up before the court?
Yeah, to the chairman, to the councilman. Since the beginning that we were enacting and thinking through how to develop this program, we met with the Housing Court. So they were fully aware. We had those conversations, at least 2 meetings, and I specifically spoke with the mediators. They had the in-house mediators, so they're fully aware of the program. They also have shared the information multiple times in social media. And whenever an eviction is filed, the tenant and the landlord become aware. There are limitations because the landlords don't have to necessarily take this income or these payments, but they're fully aware, fully engaged about the program. I mean, they have reached out multiple times with if we could get the flyers and updated information. So it's definitely something that they're told whenever there's an eviction filed. So they're definitely being a great partner within the limitation that we can obligate the tenant, the landlords to accept it or the tenants to use it. But definitely they're in the forefront of awareness for the community.
Great. Thank you. And obviously, our goal is to make sure that there's an awareness of this program prior to anyone ending up in housing court. But certainly, it's an important backstop. And then, Mr. Chair, if I'm able to kind of go back to Assistant Director Wacker's presentation, I do have two questions, and we don't need to pull it up or anything. I can describe it. The first, and this is really a request, the larger city map that showed all the different push pins of all the different services and it's color coded. Maybe it's difficult to name off what the colors correspond to at this second, but is that information that we could get? As I look at the map, it's heavy in pins across the city, but comparing say Ward 17 and Ward 1, the color coding is very differently, and I think it'd be helpful for us as council to understand how specifically these dollars are being implemented and what we need to do to fill in gaps or appreciate areas of need, things like that. Is that something that we could get from the department?
McKeel?
Yeah, I could certainly provide that. I did provide the presentation to council staff. But
yeah, we all have it. Thank you.
Yeah, so just so you know right now, so green pins are generally rental assistance. The yellow tends to be food bank related programming. Blue is food delivery. When you get into purple, that's homelessness initiatives. And the red pins are referral services, but I can get you a copy and a key so you can see that. The differences in distribution have largely to do with our partners, where they're located and where they concentrate. All of them are required to provide services across the city or have residents from across the city take advantage of their programs. So the really location of our partners dictates a lot of what you see in terms of distribution.
So on Assistant Director Wacker, so on slide 6, where it says reported accomplishments by activities, should be able to color code next to that activity, and they'll be able to refer back to it.
Yeah, I can get you a key so you can.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. And yeah, Mr. Chair, obviously it's a large city and the needs are going to vary by different neighborhood to neighborhood, but for us to be able to understand, how this is actually playing out on the ground, I think will be good information as each of us in our roles work to help support our residents. And then just the final question, also on the presentation, there was the slide that noted the goals versus accomplishments, and for utility assistance and broadband access, it appears that we're at 0% of the goal. And I'm just curious if that's a little more background on that. Is that, startup pains, are things in the works, or is data just sort of lagging? Obviously both of those are important, especially broadband as kids are, doing remote learning. And I want to make sure we're on target for providing dollars to people if they need them.
Yeah, so I'll start with utility assistance briefly. So we have two programs. One is being handled by CHN and another by May Dugan. May Dugan is up and running, but it's a smaller program. Their goals are very modest, but the large portion of that goals is really made up of CHN's commitments. And to be honest, CHN has been entirely focused on rental assistance and making sure that's up and running appropriately. They will be transitioning and focusing and devoting staff time to utility assistance. But when they saw that they had an influx of over 2,000 applications initially, and now it's over 3,000 applications, they made a concerted choice to focus on rental assistance because keeping people housed is probably needs to be addressed now, and addressing people's back utilities can be addressed later. Broadband, we've been working with Digital C. We did discuss this last month after 2 months of reports where we know they're doing work, but they had not yet reported accomplishments. And we were able to get a letter from them indicating milestones on how they're going to go forward and report accomplishments. But a lot of it has to do just August and September, they were focused on helping students and the school system, and now they're going to be sort of circle back and fill in the gaps in terms of reporting that's needed. But we do have a plan in place in order to achieve that.
Thank you for that information. And as that kind of lagging data comes in, whether it's a formal presentation like this or just sending something over to council, I think that'd be useful to see as well. And with that, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will yield the floor.
Thank you, Councilman. And also, I know Councilman raised some issues on the business side through economic development, and we'll be sure, if I can ask Joe Titron, we can have that on our agenda for next week to make sure we get an update on the business assistance that a lot of us are talking about as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Joe Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo my colleagues' sentiments on our director moving to a new chapter in her life. Really appreciate all the hard work that she's done, establishing and setting up a department, as well as delivering various programs throughout the city of Cleveland, helping the needs of our people across our great city. Mr. Chairman, I just thank you for this program, having to discuss it and talk about it. And it truly is a significant program. And my concerns would be, how are we getting that information out, aside from just our providers driving it? Do we have any brochures, any literature, or anything like that where I can get this information to my constituents? Mr. Chairman, to the director.
So through the chair to the councilman, that's a good point, right? We have shared more broadly the CARES Act information beyond our partners to CDCs, to other partners that we work with, but there isn't one place where everything is listed. And I do think that's a good suggestion and something we should follow up on. We have really look to our partners to communicate the specifics of their programs, because as I think you can appreciate, that would get very confusing if that was all in one place. But just overall, what's offered beyond the initial announcements of the programs, we haven't done that. So thank you for that.
Is there a possibility that we could, Mr. Chairman, to the director, if we could move in the direction to get that information gathered? To me, it seems like it wouldn't take too long to do that. Who the contact people are, what the programs are about, and the phone numbers. And then that way I can put it in my newsletter, or I can put together a separate brochure and send it out to my constituents. And then also at the ending of your first report, the second to the last page says unmet needs reported about the various clients you have here. You have unemployment benefits, SNAP, food bank, groceries, meal delivery, access to healthcare, access to childcare, educational assistance, broadband assistance, rental assistance, delinquent on renting or facing eviction, mortgage assistance, utility assistance, tax assistance, so on, etc., home repair assistance, and seeking employment. Do we have any providers for these? I mean, you probably have several, but do we have a location where we could, put this, put a identity to it, a number for it, so that we can also get this information out to the public at large in my neighborhood?
So Assistant Director Records, why don't you provide a little context to that information? I think that'll help better understand it.
Okay.
Yeah, that list of referrals, really, we are, rather than recreate the wheel, we want to be able to send people to sort of authoritative programs that they will get a response from. And how we're doing that is really taking advantage of United Way's 2-in-1 system. We are also funding a number of, I think it's 10 referral partners, which includes United Way, but also a number of other CDCs and nonprofits throughout the city. And they're all taking advantage of the United Way's sort of database to refer clients to the appropriate resources. Because rather than just put out a list of here are all the various programs under a certain type of need, each of those programs have different eligibility requirements. And we don't want to just send people to a program where it doesn't really meet their household needs and their eligibility issues. So what we've been doing is having our partners, as they get a client, they sort of do an initial screening. They sort of tap into the 2-in-1 database or one of their specialists, and then they figure out, okay, which resource best fits this client. And that way we know that when we send them somewhere, they have a higher likelihood of success rather than a sort of a random phone number that they call and they might or may not get a service from. So if there's any lessons, I think what we're trying to do is build off our existing infrastructure. And if you have clients, really send them first to one of our referral agency partners for sort of to have someone hold their hand, or send them to the 2-in-1 system where United Way can sort of hold their hand.
And so United Way, well, actually, Mr. Chairman, to the distinguished gentleman, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Assistant Director Wackers.
Assistant Director Wacker. Did I say that right? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the Assistant Director Wacker. So then if I want to have my citizens to try to qualify for these, then the best route would go to be them to call 201 United Way.
211.
And do you have someone there that I can speak to at United Way? A direct contact person?
Well, if you call that line directly, you'll be put in touch directly with one of their resource specialists. And then you can either have the client talk to them directly, or they've even been, how we've been doing it is where our referral partners acts as sort of a guide, and with United Way and our referral partner in conjunction with our client, they all sort of work together to come up with what's the best solution for their need.
Well, I have more questions, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Wagner. So I would love to offline kind of get a direction here so that we can see how we can access these resources in our community. And I don't want to tie up the council's time on asking questions I know I can get the answers to offline. Mr. Chairman, moving along with the questions to the director, the city of Cleveland, when we're looking at this particular program, is it only for rental assistance? Will we be able to help people who are behind on their mortgages too? Mr. Chairman, to the director.
So through the chair to the councilman, these programs right now, the rental assistance are for landlords, for renters. As we're going into next year and the moratorium on foreclosures is lifted, we will be looking at programs to support homeowners. But right now, all of the funds are either for renters, or then all those basic needs programs that Assistant Director Wacker spoke to.
I see.
But there is some programs that are in place now that on the federal side, that there's been a moratorium on helping homeowners with their not with direct assistance, but deferrals and back-ending mortgages.
I see. So do we have, Mr. Chairman, do you have that information? I mean, for those who are in my neighborhood who are like really behind. So, but we don't offer that right now through the city or through any of our providers, Mr. Chairman, do we?
We do not. It was governed out of insured mortgages that on the federal side.
Okay. And so, Mr. Chairman, to the director, the funds that are mixed in with the community development block grant dollars and dollars from the coronavirus relief fund provided by the CARES Act, what is that? How much funding are we getting through this rental assistance program? I know we have 11.3 million listed here from the city of Cleveland, and Cuyahoga County has a commitment of 6.8 million. So how much of that 11.3 million is from the CARES Act?
So through the chair to the councilman, the city's allocation is 100% through the CARES Act funds. The county's allocation, a portion of it is also Treasury funds that were coming under the CARES Act, but it's through the Treasury rather than through HUD. And just to clarify just for a minute, what Councilman Brancatelli was saying is that the programs that are in place because of the coronavirus that require banks to defer payment on mortgages. They call it forbearance. Most of those programs do start to expire at the beginning of next year. They may get renewed. There are many banks that are talking about continuing those programs, but ultimately homeowners will need to pay their mortgages. But the good thing would be is if it's all just pushed out, right? So it's not like at the end, and again, it seems like there's a commitment to this. You don't suddenly owe 4 months of mortgages. It would just add your payments to the end, and many homeowners will be able to handle that. The programs we're looking at is into next year. We may need to provide some financial assistance as banks do start to collect, and that's what we're evaluating. But the immediate need, with COVID was rental assistance. It seems like that, and that's been the case across the board as we've talked to other partners in other cities. We've all prioritized this because of the fact that homeowners have gotten forbearance on their loans.
So, Mr. Chairman, actually, this is a great program to help the citizens of the city of Cleveland, and certainly would like to talk to Mr. Wacker, Commissioner Wacker, Mr. Chairman, Assistant Director Wacker, Mr. Chairman, to Director, and then to Tanya Anise. Don't be surprised if a number of city council members come down there and make you stay. God bless you, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. And I think, as the director pointed out, I mean, these programs are ending in December, and it's the tsunami of what we're going to see. I think VAPAC had a very good discussion a couple of days ago on what's going to happen in January when all this comes due, because the rent is not being deferred at the back end. The rent's going to be due in January, and the evictions are going to be coming. and that's very concerning, that being able to get as much assistance out as we can. And I think a number of folks certainly commended the department. And Maria, as noted, fixing the plane as we're flying, this is a challenge. Getting this much money out and trying to live within the bureaucracy, as Councilman Jones pointed out, is a true challenge of being able to meet these guidelines. And so we're, and I think that Maria also pointed out the difficulty in reaching out to tenants. Many tenants are figured they're under the safe umbrella of, well, they can't evict me, so I'm not dealing with it. And we're seeing a lot of that right now. I would have assumed that we would have been at 7,000 or 8,000 applications by now, but folks are just not dealing with the reality of it. And likewise with the utility shutoffs and that moratorium ending in January, a lot of utility companies, including our own electric and water, are going to be struggling with having to deal with these shutoffs lifted. And we've had housing court in on a number of sessions with VAPAC and other citywide agencies, and housing court is the requirement to have that tenant be engaged is real. The landlord cannot get the assistant without the tenant applying, and so we have to make sure we continue to communicate with our tenants. Don't ignore this. Don't put it off, because at some point we are going to be out of money, and we're going to have to deal with the reality of a huge tsunami of evictions that are going to be coming. And the courts have been very sensitive in working around this, but it's going to be a real challenge. And as we've been seeing in the churn of real estate, we've also talked about there's a session tomorrow at CSU around the hot potato of all these new property owners that are buying property under corporations and LLCs that aren't even acknowledging the efforts that we're trying to do. And I'll send a notice out to our colleagues on that session tomorrow. But that's a huge session, because we have these new out-of-town property owners that are now buying in bulk again, and just not adhering to the regulations and the rules that we have, and not working. They're just flying below the radar. So that's going to continue to be another wave of families that we're going to have to deal with. And I did want to ask a couple of quick questions around Maria on the lease situation. So we are requiring that families have a lease in place, and they're just not month to month on a verbal when we're providing assistance.
Yes, due to HUD regulations for the care funding, we do require a lease.
And so are we advising families, and especially, there's such a huge percentage of the our landlords that are the mom and pop small owners, maybe a handful of properties who are there. Are we helping them with putting leases together if need be?
Yes, I heard from CNH Housing Partners that they could help them navigate through that process if necessary.
Okay, and you also noted around housing inspections. So is only Eden the one that is doing housing inspections, or is CHN doing housing inspections as well?
No, Mr. Chairman, for the emergency assistance, there's no inspection required. It's very basic, the lease, the documentation, and the self-certification for income. Once they complete the 4 months, then Eden, because of the source of funding for that, requires inspection. So the first 4 months, they could get no inspection required. That's after the first 4 months with Eden. And
is Eden coordinating with Building and Housing on that inspection? Since we are have a concerted effort to go through and look and inspect rental properties, are they coordinating that checklist so that it mirrors what Building and Housing is looking for in terms of peeling paint, lead paint, et cetera?
I'm not sure if there's like a side-by-side checklist. I know since we started the program, the director from that department was also involved in the process. So there's awareness of what's needed from all ends. Also, Eden helps them walk through the process and give them the opportunity to complete and reinspect. There's also an appeals process if maybe perhaps they can't pay it at the time. And right now we're looking at potentially helping or finding sources to help those small landlords that they haven't attended to certain things that are minor, but perhaps they don't have the money because they're still owed rent. So we're working through that piece. We understand that's definitely a barrier. So there's awareness. There might not be a direct checklist for both departments, but definitely everyone has been aware because they have been involved in the process.
Yeah, I think that might be helpful if Eden's going to get through 1,000 homes, say through inspections. That would certainly be great if it went in partnership with what our inspectors are doing or Building and Housing. So, we need to get through the inspections of a lot of rental properties throughout the city that the director is committed to. So I know with that new lead law kicking in March, that's a big concern. And we've also gotten a lot of concerns from landlords where the tenants just aren't cooperating, and they're not filling out the application or providing information. And in that case, housing court says, if they file the eviction for non-payment and they're not willing to go for rental assistance, then the evictions will go forward. It's tough to protect folks from themselves, but with all the assistance out there and the right to counsel, there's a lot of opportunities for folks to get help. And we just have to keep on, as Councilman Bashir Jones mentioned, we got to keep getting that word out, making sure people see what's out there. Any other issue that we're concerning is folks who are just avoiding the courts altogether and avoiding the rental assistance. We've seen an uptick in self-help evictions. And I know VAPAC has been raising that issue, and there's some talks of potential legislation to try and protect residents from self-help. But I think tomorrow's session at Cleveland State's Forum, I think is going to address some of that and see how we can kind of try and prevent that. So, and have we run in on I know the utilities assistance has been a small sampling. Have we been running issues around folks not having utilities in their name and providing assistance?
Short answer is that it does occur, and it's not frequent, but it is definitely a pattern that we see.
And I think that it might expose itself more once we start catching up with that, as we start going down that path. And I think certainly as we continue to communicate with folks, having them call United Way the 211 for help is just a great path to get people pointed in the right direction. I know Councilmember McCormick had some additional questions. Councilmember McCormick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No additional questions. All my questions have been answered by my colleagues. I just wanted to add just briefly my praise for Director Maness. I don't know if we're going to have a committee meeting by the time she has moved on. You know, in addition to the nice words that have been said about her, not only do I think she's been a really effective director in community development, but she's also been a critical point on a lot of really important legislation here in the city. So she's not only moved the ball in the department, but from a policy perspective, she's been a leader here at the city of Cleveland. So she's got her, you know, definitely a lot of work to do over at CNP. So we look forward to that. But I just wanted to add that we, you know, there are people that could do a lot of things and make more money in the private sector, and she's one of them. But she's a committed public servant. So I just wanted to thank her for her service at the city, and I know that we all look forward to working with her in the future.
Thank you, Councilman. Director, when do you get your final eviction notice that you have to leave?
First of all, thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. My last day with the city is the 23rd. But I think you all know that many of the things that we're working on, I will continue to be working on in partnership with the Department of Community Development and many of you. So you have the same work.
You'll have to come face DPS committee again. So there you go.
Indeed.
I think we have most all our questions answered around the CARES Act. We are going to come back and talk about some of the small business assistance. One of the questions that also we are relying, and I think it was mentioned that we're relying a lot on our third-party agencies that are delivering these services, and most of this is reimbursement basis.
Right.
What happens when we get stuck? And I think Assistant Director Wackers had mentioned, you know, sometimes you may get groups that get rejected for reimbursements. What happens in between there?
So to the chair, I believe what you're asking, I mean, I think the nice thing again about public services is the reporting requirements to be reimbursed are much more straightforward than a lot of what you see with our broader CDC community. With that said, Assistant Director Wackers, there's a portal, so everything can be submitted online. So we're not doing anything with paper. And he's done an ongoing amount of training sessions. Again, a lot of the agencies already work with us, so they were comfortable with what we do, but we are working with new agencies as well. And then for a few of the programs with large ticket items, we've worked with our finance department to provide some advances because of the dollars going out quickly. But we are paying monthly, and I think that's really going well.
Okay, great. Well, that's and I think, you know, the CHNs and Edens and those who have that relationship, but it is the newer ones that we want to make sure.
Definitely. And you know, as we're transitioning, Councilman, Maria did have a response back from CHN on the languages. So you want to just share that real quick, and then we'll transition.
Okay.
Yes, to the chairman, to Councilman Jones, just to answer his question, I reached out to CHN to see any updates, because that was definitely some of the conversations we had. How do we service all residents? So the Spanish, they do have directly the Spanish line and the website, but in terms of other languages, they have a network of nonprofit organizations that they're utilizing and continue to utilize for that. One example they share is the Refugee Center. They also just share that most of the tenants that speak other languages, they're actually being referred by those partners in the community. So they're definitely are serviced, and there's a way to help those residents as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
I think we have exhausted our CARES Act, and we have a few other additional items to deal.
Sure. So we're going to have Manager Nina Holzer talk about the Community Engagement Healthy Home Initiative. The last update was as we renewed the contracts for the program in June. And so Nina will talk a little bit about the work under COVID, and then just generally the progress the program has made over the last 2 years.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It is still morning. Good morning, everyone. As the director said, I'm going to provide some general program updates as related to the Community Engagement Healthy Homes Initiative. I do have a map that I believe was shared with everyone, though I will certainly pull it up in a couple of minutes. But just quickly, in terms of updates, since I last presented to the committee back in May, we were able to hire another community engagement specialist, growing our team to 15 community engagement specialists, which is really exciting. That individual works out of Harvard Community Services Center and supports residents on the southeast side in Ward 1. So we're really excited to have that additional capacity with Healthy Homes Initiative, especially on the southeast side. I also wanted to go over some of our accomplishments to date. So as a reminder, the community engagement specialist jobs are broken down into 3 major categories. First, they conduct a routine property condition survey. Second is really focused around resident engagement and referrals. And finally, they also support the implementation of the exterior paint program, which I know we'll be talking about in a little bit. So I will pull up the map. I think I should be able to share my screen. And everyone should have a copy of it, though I'm certainly, I can definitely send it around again. Okay. I hope that that has pulled up and everyone can see that. Great. I know the resolution isn't ideal. So for certain parts of the city, you might have to zoom in to see the parcels. I apologize, especially with the yellow. It seems to blend in with the background a little bit more. But again, you should have received a copy of this map, but it shows properties that we have surveyed thus far through our routine property condition survey. Just as a qualifier, these surveys, the surveys that we conduct are sidewalk or windshield surveys. So the specialists are only really collecting exterior property data initially and cataloging what they can observe from the street. So there certainly may be things that we miss, but generally they try to get a good snapshot of the exterior of the property through these property condition surveys. And again, they're not necessarily going onto someone's property for these surveys unless someone is there and gives them permission, but that certainly has not been happening all that much. So before jumping into the results of this survey, I also want to highlight another big update, which is that we have migrated most of our data collection from Excel spreadsheets to Survey 123, which has really helped to streamline our data collection and reporting for the Healthy Homes Initiative. So going back to the map, you'll see that to date, so really between December 2019 and October 2020, we have surveyed about 15,000 parcels. Of these parcels, 9,417 were found to not have an observable violation from that sidewalk survey. 3,603 were found to have minor violations. So this could be anything from high grass and weeds, peeling paint, gutter damage, etc. And then 386 were found to have major violations, and most of these properties were open, vacant, vandalized, needing board up or needing to be reboarded, fire damaged structures, condemnable structures, or properties with major health and safety issues that would impact the individuals living in the home or around the property. So that could be, you know, a hole in the roof, the property's leaning out a plumb, the front porch is falling off. And those major violation properties are the ones that make up the bulk of our referrals to the Department of Building and Housing, especially those OBV properties. Additionally, you'll see this other findings category. So these are property data that we have in our system that were captured separate from the housing survey. So that could be paint program inspections, properties that we have information on because the specialist spoke to a resident in person or by phone and have the beginnings of a survey, but they just haven't gone out and completed a full survey yet. I know for Slavic Village, you'll see that there are a number of gray properties, and those were properties that were submitted as part of Slavic Village's vacant property survey. So I'm just having to go back and recode a lot of those as they're coming in. So that generally is where we are. And certainly as I've been migrating from our Excel reporting to Survey 123, there are a number of properties that I just need to update. So there are a few parcels that are missing from this map, but I'm really trying to get that get that refined so that we can present more solid findings to committee. But generally, this is where we are in terms of our property condition survey to date. And I would say that we were hoping to have about 20% of the city surveyed within our first year. Certainly, the pandemic impacted that, and it slowed down some of our property condition surveying early on. But the specialists have really gotten back into it, especially since the property condition surveys. There's an aspect of it of sending letters and following up with residents to talk about those survey findings. Which will feed the next portion of my presentation, which is really around referrals. But they've really been getting back into it and using this as an opportunity to reach out to residents, talk to them about housing issues, and help connect them to programs and services. So on that note, moving away from the map, I'll wait till the end for questions, but I went through, and our specialists also share the types of referrals that they're making on a monthly basis. So just as a quick snapshot, since the pandemic hit, as you can imagine, a bulk of our work has been focused on referrals and connecting folks to more social services. Specifically, we've been really focused on helping connect residents to COVID-19 assistance programs and CARES Act programs. For example, rental assistance, that has been a huge referral that a number of the specialists have been making. Additionally, food assistance programs and senior services were another category of referrals that floated to the top. Additionally, we've seen a large number of referrals to SHAP and RA, the age-friendly investment program, CHORE, Heritage Home Loan, water affordability programs such as Homestead Sewer and Water, HEAP, PIP, HWAP, and legal aid services. Those are really the ones that as I was going through our results over the last several months, seem to be the largest category of referrals that we were making. And additionally, our specialists have been tracking properties that may be candidates for next year's paint program, or as they're talking to residents who are interested in the program, they've been developing that wait list so that they could connect folks to that application once it goes live. Finally, over the last several months, we've continued to convene the group for ongoing learning. So we have a monthly cohort meeting with all of the community engagement specialists, virtually, of course, since March. And we've had a large number of presenters join us for ongoing presentations and learning. Maria joined, for example, to talk about rental assistance. We've also had the County Fishbowl join to talk about tax delinquency and helping to get folks onto payment plans and helping to connect them to the homestead tax exemption. We've had representatives from the Lead Safe Coalition join to talk about the Resource Center as it's getting up and running, building those relationships between our community engagement specialists and the outreach staff at the Resource Center, as well as getting our specialists trained up on the eligibility for the loans and grants that will be coming online. We've also had, again, CHN has joined to talk about their programs and services, Cleveland Restoration Society, Legal Aid Society, and we had another training with Case Western Reserve University on their NST system to continue to educate our specialists about additional property data that are out there that they could be educating themselves on as they go out and chat and connect with residents. So generally, I personally think things are going well. I would say that we're operating due to the pandemic at about 80%. Our capacity, it becomes difficult because so much of this work is face-to-face interaction and talking to folks. And obviously with safety measures, we're not doing that as much as we would hope we could be. But I think that our specialists have been really focused on continuing to find multiple ways of getting the word out there that their role exists and that that residents should certainly be reaching out to them if they need help connecting to programs and services, and trying to find alternate mechanisms for resident engagement. So that's what I have. I will take my map down and can answer any questions that the committee has related to the Healthy Homes Initiative.
It's a wonderful program, and certainly thank Director Manass for spearheading this and pushing this through. I think I think as you pointed out in the Broadway SPA, all the different inspections that have occurred there come from a concerted effort that their team drives by every structure twice a year. So there's a survey that's done by driving by all 12,000 structures and grading them. But it also helps give direction and assets and what's needed. My little self plug of the little kit that our Rockstar Healthy Homes Initiative, Lynn Rodman, puts out. This little box ends up on people's front porches, so it's not directly interacting in terms of having to do that engagement that we're concerned about. But it's like getting an Amazon gift box at your front door, which has PPP masks on it, survey information, cleaning fluids, hand sanitizers. It's a great little kit, and going out and getting sponsors like Metro Health and the Third Federal Foundation and many donors in the neighborhood to make that happen, I think is a direct result of the work that the Healthy Homes Initiative is doing and understanding what's needed in our community. So University Settlement and their Community Rising initiative has been a great lead into working with many of our initiatives that we're doing. So, and I think that this is an ongoing effort that we're going to need well into 2021 and 22. But congratulations on all the outreach that you are showing today on the survey results of having thousands of folks who are just don't have any violations, and identifying that we do have a strong and healthy market, but those major violations and minor violations, and then what they're engaging with on day to day shows and the rewards of what the families that you're reaching out to in the previous presentation. So thanks for all that hard work. I'm going to open up for questions on the healthy homes. Do we have anything that's jumping out right now? Is that what happens when you do such a thorough explanation that there's no questions? All right, let's move on. Do we have anything else as part of your presentation, Director?
I think you just asked for an update on the paint program. And
oh, yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Commissioner Jackson couldn't be with us this morning, but I have some general information to share. Knowing that this was the first year, again, launching a new program, and then essentially the painting season started with the pandemic. It was, I still would say, a really successful first year, but we've learned a great deal through this process. We did have 878 applicants into the program. We only had to decline 46, and that was just for property conditions. The property just wasn't going to benefit from the work. 779 vouchers have been issued for a total of $408,978. And so we are trying to get through the remaining balance. But again, for a first year, a program of $500,000, we have spent almost all of will have spent almost all the money it's committed. We're working with residents to try to have their homes painted by the end of October. But as we know, the weather is changing. We're starting to work with Sherwin-Williams to see if people who haven't been able to paint, if we can just carry their vouchers over into next year rather than having them reapply, which of course would be ideal. So we're optimistic we can get that done. There's some, I think, good lessons learned from this first year that the commissioner shared, that as we work with somebody to issue a voucher, we want to make sure that they have the support to actually get the home painted. We've mostly been able to work through that with strong support from our partners, with a list of small contractors from OEO and other things, but realizing that it's often falls on the community engagement specialists to help make that happen, and they've done a valiant effort of doing so, but would ideally like to do more of that planning up front. We also ran this program without an intake specialist through most of this year, and now we're really fortunate to have Donna Braggs and in that role, which will help a great deal. And we're in the process of hiring a new paint program manager who should be on board by the beginning of the year. And it would be good this year if we start with the program staff. That's always ideal. But I think, a pretty good job with it regardless. And then, we really found that many of the homes that we were painting really had a much larger amount of deferred maintenance than was indicated in the initial surveys. And so really grounding our definition of maintenance and how easily a home would be painted, because the costs really increased a great deal on homes where the paint really was sort of being utilized to deal with other issues on the house, which is still helpful to the resident short term, but kind of masks bigger issues, which is probably not helpful. And then finally, that we'd limit the paint colors to just 2 colors, because we have some really beautiful homes that got painted out there, but it really did increase the cost. And then the complexity of it was kind of fun to see residents take on a lot, but then maybe not so advisable. And then our next steps is, as we said, just to really close out this year, hire this new home maintenance manager, hopeful to start by January, and then to start the new program that we'd open right at the beginning of the year and have applications open probably till early March, and then have people ready to start painting in April and May. So I'm happy to try to take some questions, and if I can't answer them, I can take them back to the commissioner.
And so one of the concerns that was raised was, Sherwin-Williams has been very helpful, but the process between inspections and getting additional paint when somebody runs out, has that been tightened up, or? So anyhow, yeah, that's the question.
It will be in a couple ways. The first is that the Survey 123 tool that we were using for the program, we've improved that and learned a great deal of sort of how we should be estimating. So the goal is that we wouldn't have so many people who need additional paint, like we deal with kind of the core issue. And then some of that is also, realizing, most of it is the estimating. I don't know, Nina, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's your teams that dealt with that issue a lot when there was a discrepancy between the estimate and then how much paint was actually needed. Any things that you think will change into this year to deal with that?
So I know that we have been talking about how to improve that paint calculator moving forward. Currently, the way that the calculator calculates the amount of paint that is needed is based off of the interior, is based off of the square footage of the home from my place. And what we found was there were some discrepancies. So for example, if someone had an unfinished 3rd floor, that wasn't necessarily being captured in their square footage. So we've been discussing, I had a conversation with Building and Housing, how we might improve that calculation so that we wouldn't have as much of a discrepancy next year. So for example, one option could be to have the perimeter of the home measured and then have that multiplied by the number of floors, for example. Or Director Donald had mentioned that some of our partners that we fund provide paint services. So potentially having them come in and talk about how they calculate. So we've explored and talked about different options, though we haven't settled on anything final yet.
Thank you, Nina.
Yes, I'll channel a little bit of my Mike Polensik. Back in the day, the CDC staff would issue vouchers for additional paint when needed. So I don't know if working with the Healthy Homes folks, again, I know we're all evolving on how this works, but there might be opportunities to have the staff that are out there every day without having to wait just to get a few more gallons. So we don't, as we're coming up against issues like weather and having family members help paint, we don't want to lose that kind of momentum that gets something done.
And to the chair, I think it is really important, as we said, this was the first year we ran this program. And so Nina and the commissioner are really looking for that kind of input. I mean, again, the specialists are on the ground. They've provided a lot of really great feedback to incorporate into the program. But if you're hearing things from your residents, don't hesitate to let us know.
My residents usually aren't shy about contacting you.
Yeah.
Councilman Jones? Councilman Joe Jones?
Yes, Director, very quickly, looking at this here program here that you have for the Healthy Homes Initiative, you have this survey in play. What is the breakdown for the Lee Harbor Ward 1 area?
Through the chair to the councilman, just to clarify quickly, the breakdown, specifically the numbers for Ward 1.
That's correct. Do you have somewhere where, 'cause right now when I look at the map, I don't see anything because it's all whited out.
Through the chair
And
to
I
the
know that,
Oops, sorry,
and
I
I know that
apologize.
no, you're okay. I know that there are some violations there, but I just didn't see anything here.
Through the chair to the councilman, one of the issues is that when I exported the map, unfortunately the contrast is not great. So if you really zoom in, you could see that there are some parcels in yellow. Our community engagement specialist, Joe, who just started at Harvard, he started his property condition surveying this past month. So that's why it may appear that there are fewer parcels surveyed than in other service areas, because many of those community engagement specialists started surveying back in February. But I believe, I don't want to give you a wrong number by any means, but I know that he had been out surveying this past month, and had already done a couple, somewhere around 100 property condition surveys, and was sending letters to residents.
And Mr. Chairman, to the director, so basically, we have this here, this initiative that's just started presumably since what, February of this year?
Yes.
And so then we're not complete with the survey. This is just a snapshot right now.
Yes, it's just an update.
Okay. And so then when we get these violations, do we send it to building and housing? So building and housing can send out violation notices?
Through the chair to the councilman. So typically what will happen, the goal of the Healthy Homes Initiative is that the community engagement specialist would make an attempt to contact the property owner, homeowner, or tenant first to educate them about the observed violation and hopefully connect them to some services or programs if they needed that help. We've also found that sometimes just by sending the letter and letting people know that we've had eyes on the property encourages them to bring the property to compliance. And then if they are sending letters, they try to make that contact, and I believe typically it's if they don't hear anything back in 30 to 60 days, then we have a conversation about referring to building and housing if the property is occupied, because we wanted to, if a property is occupied, we don't want to create undue burden on a homeowner or tenant. Though if there is a health and safety issue, we've had that conversation where is it beneficial to put a little more pressure, because it could turn into a major health and safety issue for those individuals. If the property is vacant, it's a different story. So if we see that it's LLC owned, or if the property is vacant and there are these major violations, typically the specialist will just refer to building and housing. I have been working with building and housing, Tim Kobe and Michael Banks, in creating a community engagement specialist B&H referral form so that goes directly to them. And typically, I think once a week, their team goes through that form, through the results, and they'll check to see if there's already a violation in the system. And if not, they will follow up, and they communicate back to the specialist and copy me on it to say, this has been input into our system and we're following up.
I see. And so then how many community specialists do we have? Do we have one per ward, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
Should I? Okay. Through the chair to the councilman, we have 15 community engagement specialists currently. So that's 15 specialists at 13 community development corporations. I know that Famicos has 2 specialists, one working in Glenville and one working in Huff, and parts of St. Clair Superior and Asiatown. And then we have 2 at Burton Bell Carr, one working in Buckeye, and then another working in Central Kinsman and Fairfax.
I see. And so they work right along with building and housing to stay on top of these properties.
Mm-hmm. They do.
And what happens, Mr. Chairman, to the distinguished young lady if we sent a letter out, an engagement letter out to a person who has minor violations or maybe major violations, and they don't respond?
Through the chair to the councilman, we, in our procedural forms, the recommendation that I have to the specialists is if they don't hear back, if they send a letter and there is a major violation and they haven't heard anything back in anywhere from 30 to 60 days, typically it's closer to 30 days. Sometimes they'll send another letter, or depending on the issue, if it is a major violation, they will refer it to building and housing through that form.
I see. And so building and housing, I know they're not on the line here. So how do they handle it? Because one of the concerns that we have in our neighborhood right now, unfortunately, is our housing stock is going down. And we have a building and housing department that is supposed to provide a service to our community, and unfortunately have been broken over the years. And I know that we have a new director that's in place. And when I say broken, what I mean by that is that we have properties right here at the corner of Lee and Miles, and it's been there for years, and it is literally deteriorating, where now you can actually see inside the property because it has deteriorated so much. And so it's like, this is 60, 40, 50 years of total not doing anything. And so when you have that in our communities, who wants to come and invest in the neighborhood if they see that? Who wants to come and move over into the neighborhood if they see that? You know, and so that's been the situation. I know that the east side has been hit hard, and you know, one of our jobs as council members is how do we deal with those issues. So the question would be, for those various different 15 community engagement people, do they also have inspectors from building and housing working hand in hand in tandem with them?
So let me just take that, Nina, through the chair to the councilman. So, you know, it was really important as we developed this program. We work really closely with building and housing, but the community engagement specialists would not be seen as building and housing officials, right? Because we have very different roles. The building and housing officials are required by the ordinance to enforce the laws of the city. And for that reason, again, such an important role, but are viewed by residents very differently. And we need our specialists to be trusted by residents to help provide them with support. And so while behind the scenes, we do work closely together for, you know, and Director Donald and I have talked about this a lot. We're really best served, and it's kind of a crass way to put it, but we're kind of the good cops, and building and housing need to be the bad cops. And in that way, we're able to, I think, much more appropriately support the city. So when we say hand in hand, I mean, definitely behind the scenes, but not in terms of how we sorry, I can't speak, how we interact with residents.
So yeah, and so this is very similar to the code partnership program from years ago, but the soft letters coming from the CDC and offering help, the voluntary compliance has been very good, and it's been a pretty high percentage. But when we don't have voluntary compliance is when building and housing is asked to step in, and we can have a session directly with Director Donald and talk about that transition from non-voluntary compliance to building and housing inspections and how we can track that on a CELA. So we can do that separate from the healthy homes piece.
I would like that, Mr. Chairman. We can do that, set that up. And then also just on the home and healthy initiative, I know that we've had something similar to this in the past in the city of Cleveland. Do we kind of like compare and contrast as relates to where we are right now? Have we gotten better? Have we gotten worse? You know, do we have any kind of statistical information that can tell us that, Director?
Well, if I'm following you correctly through the chair to the councilman, overall, from a building and housing perspective, we're doing much better, right? I mean, I just, the market, the economy, the hard work of the department, the fact that the city has been able to, since the recession, staff the department much more. Our number of demolitions and as well as fractions has decreased a great deal, which is why we felt like this was a more appropriate area where people generally need more help. If they're not complying with building and housing, often the issue is they just don't have the resources to.
Right. So basically, I just make sure I'm hearing it right. So I'm gonna rephrase it somewhat. So am I hearing that our housing stock in the city of Cleveland is far much better than what it was maybe 5 years ago?
Well, through the chair to the councilman, I want to be a little careful there. Yeah,
I could step in a little bit on this. I think just by sheer math, I mean, building and housing is demolished along with the county land bank, nearly 20,000 units of substandard housing. So when you add the numerator to the denominator and you take all those bad F properties off, percentage-wise, our housing stock is in fact getting better. When you layer in the work that the Healthy Homes and the paint program and others are doing through Repair Home, SHAP, et cetera. The bigger issue is that we have a city that's over 200 years old and getting older and getting poorer. And that's where we get stuck on how do we evaluate what the housing stock really is.
And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, to the director, well, actually one more question after this one. What are we doing are we doing anything with business structures?
To the councilman through the chair, not through this initiative. Building and Housing had started a Main Street inspection group that is targeting certain areas of the city. So I think following with Director Donald on that, I know they were just starting to get ramped up as COVID started, but it is really important that we are looking at the Main Street corridors of businesses.
Okay. And then the paint program, Mr. Chairman, what I would like to know is that it's been really difficult for my citizens to access it. So to get the free paint vouchers, so this paint program, when will they start accepting vouchers?
So the next year's application, so we'll start the 2021 program, accepting applications in January, and there'll be information coming out about that. So
we'll be accepting the voucher paint program starting January 2021. And when is your close date?
Well, so we'll start accepting applications in January and likely stop accepting applications in early March, with then the idea that then people would get vouchers in April and May and have the summer and fall to paint. And then like this year, close out, right about now as the weather's changing, right as we get into November. But as we had mentioned, there's, some review happening about this year's program. So those dates may change somewhat, but largely that's the calendar.
And we'll be able to address this when we get to the budget hearing portion of CDBG.
Right. And then I guess the question would be, the reason why we close that timeline off is because there's only so many of these we can accept.
Yes, we are fully expending, or will come very close to fully expending this year's allocation.
Okay. And then if I could ask a question, what is the allocation, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
The total for this past year was $500,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the director. No further questions.
Thank you. I do not see any other additional hands raised. So thank you very much for a robust discussion. I think there's a lot of this initiative and the CARES Act. Certainly folks have their plate full, and considering you've been managing out of this COVID crisis with staff in and out and trying to figure out how to survive remotely has been a success story of a juggling act. So thank you very much. I also wanted to make sure I thank you for all the great work you're doing. It's just amazing to see what you have accomplished in a short time. I don't want to go without sharing when you first arrived on the scene. Thank you for your great work and everything you've done. And then just wanted to share one more, if I can find it. Where'd it go? There it is. And that's when she announced that she's going over to Neighborhood Progress, and she looks so much happier, doesn't she?
No, so Councilman, this picture's just older, so I just look younger. That's all, right? Cranes grabbed that from something else. So yes, I probably was happier because I was younger. And then I was also standing in front of the mayor, which of course is always a little intimidating. So, but thank you, Councilman. I do want to say I've really appreciated your support coming into this position as the chair. I know you'll provide similar support to Assistant Director Wackers. And I also thank you for acknowledging the fact that our team has really not missed a beat with COVID. They've worked really, really hard across the board, and it's great to hear that you see that. We've been really, I'm really proud of them. So thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you all very much. With that, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.